Hey, here's something interesting about Japan that might blow your mind. You know how in Japan, when kids go to school, they don't actually take Japanese language class. They take something called Kokugo, or national language. If you're thinking this is like English literature class in America, it's really not. Let me explain why this is fascinating. Here's the thing. Before the Meiji period in the late 1800s, there wasn't even a concept of Japanese language as we know it today. Wild, right? What we now call Kokugo was basically created by the government as part of building a modern nation-state. It was a top-down standardization of language, super different from how most countries developed their national languages. Back in the day, before the Meiji period, Japan had this really complex linguistic situation. You had the fancy, elegant language and written language that only the upper class and intellectuals used, and then you had all these different dialects that common people spoke. And get this, people from different regions could barely understand each other. It was like having different languages within the same country. So when Japan was trying to become a modern nation-state, they had this problem. How do you unite people who can't even talk to each other? Their solution was pretty unique. They created Kokugo, literally meaning the language of the nation. They couldn't just call it Japanese language because, well, there wasn't really a unified Japanese language at that point. Here's where it gets really interesting. The idea became that speaking this standardized Kokugo made you Japanese. It wasn't about citizenship laws or anything. It was about language ability. Think about how different that is from America, where being American isn't tied to speaking perfect English. Even during the time of the emperor system, you had these fascinating debates. Communists and socialists who opposed the emperor system were also fighting against how Kokugo education was being used to control people's thoughts. It wasn't just about language. It was about identity and power. The really wild part? It wasn't until the late 1960s that most Japanese people actually started speaking the same way and living similar lifestyles. That's when some scholars say the creation of the Japanese people was finally complete. But here's the catch. The debate about who counts as Japanese kind of fizzled out in the 1940s, and we're still dealing with those unresolved questions today in 2024. You know what's really interesting about discrimination in Japan? It's totally different from racial discrimination in America. In Japan, you can have people who look exactly the same discriminating against each other based on ethnic and cultural differences. It's like this invisible line that only insiders can see. So when we talk about who is Japanese, it's still super complicated. The definition has changed with the times and politics, and even today, there's no clear answer. It's this mix of legal citizenship, culture, language ability, and identity that makes it more of a philosophical question than anything else. Isn't it fascinating how something as basic as what you call your language class can open up this whole complex history of national identity? That's the kind of stuff that makes studying Japan so interesting.